So welcome everybody. My name is Kirsten, some people call me Kay, and we are here with Katrin, and she is going to be moving us along in a wonderful practice that is part of our launch series for our 300-hour trauma-informed movement facilitator training that's coming up in October. And if you'd like to know more about that, I will go ahead and put everything in the chat that you need. I don't want to get too far into it because I really want to give Katrin the floor in order to move you through this practice, which is going to be amazing. She's one of my most favorite people, and just practicing with her is such a joy and also just a good friend. So I really appreciate your time, Katrin. I'm so happy you're here, and it's all you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting me here this evening and for the opportunity. I am so excited to be a guest facilitator on your 300-hour training. I mean, there is so much to cover on that topic, and this is a tiny, tiny little aspect of how I approach my teaching in yoga. So this is not everything in 1 hour. It's impossible. One fundamental kind of principle that I explore in the practice is to move from sensory input. So that's the title of today's session. I'm going to try and, this is not necessarily how I would teach a class to the general public. So I'm assuming you're all a facilitator of some form, maybe you're a yoga teacher or you're interested in this training, obviously. So I will be adding notes, side notes as to why we might be doing something or how you might be facilitating something or creating something. But at the same time, it's also meant to be a practice, and I very warmly invite you to practice along, because it's about getting a felt sense of what we're doing. Since the topic is moving from sensory input, from sensation. So the only way to really speak to the body about that is through the body. So definitely an invitation to join me on the mat. And that is optional, of course, as is everything. The whole, everything we do here is, as Kirsten said, invitational. If there is something that is coming up for you that doesn't feel comfortable for you, take yourself out of that situation, stop, pause, press the pause button off the recording, come back to it later, return to the practice tomorrow. That's all good. Maybe there'll be a few things that you'll find really valuable and you take along, and maybe none of what we're doing here today is for you and you just let it pass. That's also fine. I want to, like I said, really get on the mat. So I can talk forever about this stuff, but I'm going to try and not talk so much. But I do want to just share my screen for a moment. I'm not going through all of, by the end of this class, you will blah, 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 because, I mean, you know, it's just a little taster. But here is the thing about sensory input. So this is an observation we can make in ourselves as well as in people around us who we know, work with, who we see on the street. We have, over the course of our lifetime, lost quite a significant part of our innate intelligence. And what I mean by that is that the body is an extraordinary design. I literally can't sometimes quite comprehend how extraordinary it is. I think it's magic. But through our modern lifestyle and all of the stories of our life and all of our experiences and all of the conditioning and things that we are being told, quite a lot of our ability, our range of motion, our vitality, our flexibility, our intelligence, our resilience gets kind of numbed down, covered up, lost, even since in our modern lifestyle, especially, we don't have the need for a lot of it anymore. And so you might argue, well, if you don't need it, then why bother about it? That is quite true. Maybe, I don't know, that's one way of thinking about it. But really what this means is that, you know, if we are losing part of this intelligence, we are a being of relation. Nothing in our body functions in isolation. You cannot take any one part out and it won't function on its own, nor will then the rest of the body continue to function. So if part of our innate intelligence is lost, it will have an impact on the rest of our body and on our health ultimately. And it kind of leads to a very poor mapping, I call this, of the body as well as movement. So, you know, we don't climb trees anymore, for example. So reaching up and extending through the spine has almost become obsolete, like, because we don't have to climb rocks and trees anymore. Like, we just sometimes need to reach up to get something down from the shelf, but that's kind of almost it. We are wearing shoes. I mean, our feet are really not designed to wear shoes and walk on concrete all day. So they really lose strength, resilience, intelligence through our lifetime. We sit on chairs, also not what we're designed to do. So all of these aspects. Plus, there might be, you know, quite significant experiences in our lifetime that has developed and resulted into a whole bunch of behavioral patterns and physical patterns in the body, adding to this poor mapping and so on. So put the picture of the little child, because as when we were a baby and then growing up in that early developmental stage, we were learning purely from sensory input. It wasn't really that rational, because, I mean, you know, if you try to learn something and literally fall on your backside, you know, 20 times, why would you ever carry on trying to learn that? But we did. We carried on until we could walk. We eventually managed to get that spoon into our mouth after creating quite a lot of mess everywhere. And that is learning from sensory input. And so we've lost that ability over time, to the point that we've lost our ability often, not everyone, of course, but we've lost our ability to really discern and discriminate between sensation and pain, for example. What is interoception? What is nociception? And that is an issue, for example, for people suffering from chronic pain or have developed a hypersensitivity through a particular story in their life. We have lost the ability to really understand, is this fear? Is this just a sensation? Is this pressure? Is this uncomfortable? Is this actual real pain? Because pain, of course, is a warning signal that's designed for us to stay away from something. And that, with this poor mapping of our movement and our body, basically creates I'm going to say like a fertile ground. I mean, that would be kind of like a positive thing, but it does create a fertile ground for chronic pain, more tension and holding patterns to develop and to grow. It makes it much easier for chronic pain to take hold of parts of the body and to spread as well, because we are not able to really discern what was going on through sensation, because we've lost that ability. So working with yoga and many other body-mind practices, we have a huge potential to really support people improving their interoception and proprioception. So what they are, what their sensations are within, as well as how they relate to their environment around them. Because one aspect of this is actually that people probably develop this poor mapping also because they don't feel like they fit in their environment. And so if we take particular focus on fostering interoception, so noticing, observing, understanding the body, speaking with the body, listening, reconnecting with the body, then we can actually really make quite a change for people. And so this becomes very relevant when we start to work with people who might be suffering from chronic pain or chronic conditions, chronic diseases even, that often come with pain, unhelpful holding patterns, anxiety, tension in the body. But also to actually help prevent that and maintain a healthy system. So this is kind of, I mean, if we had 7 more hours in the day and then we would drink all of our green smoothies and do 3 hours of practice and all that, but if only that was possible, we could prevent a whole lot. So to me, this is like a huge potential that yoga kind of brings to the table. And I do sadly observe that it's not really being fostered quite as much as I would like to see in many classes, especially as there's a huge trend of, kind of yoga for fitness and for the beautiful body and, all of that. And so this aspect really hardly even gets mentioned or included in the teachings. Whereas I think it's absolutely crucial because it's really one of the greatest things that yoga can give us, thinking about the physical aspect in the body. So here is just a bit of a random image, really a little collection of some food for thought. One thing to really always remember is that the human being has evolved to heal. So this is about, finding ways to change the story of the pain that we get told over and over and over again to a story of health. And this is actually one of the biggest issues that, most people feel the pain exactly where they've been told to feel it. I'm going to say that again. Many people feel the pain exactly where they have been told to feel it. And these stories get embedded in our body until they become so real that we can't distinguish anymore what isn't real. And so we have the opportunity to change some of those stories. And this is my personal story, which I already shared during the meet and greet. So that's available on YouTube already, I think. Anyway, if you want to hear that. So I mentioned already also, it could be about the fact that people feel uncomfortable and that they don't fit in their environment, and we can help people with that. As we are beings of relation, and fostering and nurturing proprioception will help us with that. So yeah, in a way, so one of the key things in yoga is that it helps us clarify the way that we perceive sensation for what it really is. And that means that, we can, in a way, like see life for what it really is, and much more clearly for what it really is. I'm going to stop the screen share here just to see if there is any comments or questions. I'm very happy to answer that and give a little bit of time to that, but I also want to get on the matter. I am very well sort of breezed through that. I very happily teach an entire day on that. So I want to just make sure that for context, that feels okay. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so I come from a Scaraveli-inspired yoga practice, but also very strongly influenced by osteopathic principles and body work and Feldenkrais practices, somatics. And so that leads to a practice that is very quiet, very slow, very soft. There is no pushing and no pulling. That kind of also means that I don't really, what's the word? I don't ask you to use any props, as in I don't mention them. But if you want to use any props, because you know that you enjoy, the only thing literally is like, if you want to sit on a cushion, go ahead. But if you know that you love using blocks for this or that or what, then go ahead and make that work for you. That's absolutely no problem. I'm happy to talk more on why I don't really prompt the props, but that would probably be another class altogether. So let's get on the mat, and we'll start by lying down. And to begin with, I invite people to really like have a bit of a roll around. I'm going to join you for a little bit for the beginning. Also for the recording, you can refer back to it or stop as and when to keep a bit of an eye. So when I say I invite you to roll around, that is freestyle. So you can wave your arms, you can wave your legs or not. You might come into a stretch or a twist. None of this has to be symmetrical at all. It's a little way of checking in with the body and how the body is feeling today, this evening, this morning. I don't know where you are all joining from. Saying hello to the ground, to the mat, letting the body get in touch with the mat. Also noticing if there is maybe a little niggle or something going on for you today that you want to make a little bit of space for the practice. And then we can bring all of that back into the center. And to begin with, I would like you to straighten your legs out if that feels okay for your back. If you know your lower back really doesn't like this, then of course keep them bent, but it's only for a moment. We'll straighten the legs out. And then as an additional option, try raising your arms and bring them down behind you, over your head behind you. Feel free to bend those arms off enough here to have them resting. And we won't stay here for too long. So as I've got you lying here, all sort of stretched out or partially stretched out as you choose for yourself, take a moment and notice what that feels like. What do you notice in the body here? You know, we're not in a room, so I can't kind of sort of have you popcorn style shout it out. So I'm going to second guess a little bit for you. But it might be that you might actually feel quite a strong stretch somehow, or you might feel that some part of the body isn't quite as comfortable as you would like it to be. You might notice how there is a subtle sense of activation, even though we're lying down. Or you might notice the slight lengthening through the body, as you here in your full length. Maybe you're noticing that a little bit more across your front body or more your back body. Maybe take a moment and check which parts of the body are physically touching the ground right now. How is the body connecting with the mat? And then also take a moment and notice your breathing. Where and how is your breath doing with this position? So here's my little side note. We are obviously trying to get people notice all of those things that I just listed, or maybe other things, of course, but also particularly in relation to the breath, how the breath moves and changes depending on the position of the body. And that's quite important. Like our breath is meant to move more this way or be more in that part of the body, depending on how we move. And when we carry, for example, anxiety tension in the diaphragm, that's compromised already. So for a little bit of contrast, we would get people to change position here. And so let's do that as well. Let's slowly, maybe taking a knee out to the side, bend it and place the foot on the ground. And then taking the other leg, bending it, placing the foot on the ground. So both knees are bent, feet flat. Notice how that changes things in the body. So you might notice how the pelvis has tilted a little bit differently here. There's a different quality in the legs. And let's bring, if the arms are over your head, let's bring the arms down to the side of the body somewhere comfortable as well. And then as you arrive here, again, we notice, checking in, how does that feel in comparison? What's different now? And so again, our second guess here for you. You might find that the back body has a different contact to the ground now, for example. You might notice that that stretch sensation, that lengthening is gone. And that just somehow feels different. So to me, if I was to describe it for myself, it feels quieter. For some reason, I describe sensations often with sounds, like it's noisy in the body or it's quieter in the body. But you might describe that visually, might have a color, a different color or a different smell even. And then check how your breathing has changed, possibly. So you might notice, possibly, that the movement of the breath is happening a little bit more in the abdomen now. It isn't so chesty anymore. It's not so high up anymore. It's kind of dropped a little bit down. Great. And so let's straighten one leg along the floor. Let's all, just to help me out with my lefts and rights, let's all straighten the left leg along the floor. Left leg along the floor. The right one stays bent. So with the left leg straight, let's take a moment and let the left leg really flop out. Let it be heavy as much as you can. Let the left side of the pelvis drop and the whole left side of the body become quite passive. It kind of sort of wants to step out of the way almost. And then we shift our focus to that right foot that's still standing on the mat. In fact, wiggle it a little bit, crunch your toes, stretch the foot a little bit, maybe move the heel, and really consciously plant that sole of the foot down onto the mat. It wants to have a really good contact. And then we start to deepen the imprint of that foot in the mat and see if you can make it quite even. And so that means you're probably beginning to press a little bit down through that right foot. And notice how the body responds to that. And so this is maybe not something I would mention to the general public class, but to you guys, I will say that in the ideal world, you'll notice your right side of the pelvis getting a little bit lighter. And if it isn't, then that's a sign that we are holding quite a bit of tension here around the pelvis, maybe the pelvic floor or in the abdominals or the lower back muscles. That has become quite habitual and that we're not quite so connected here. So let's see if we can keep dropping the left side of the pelvis. Let that be passive and heavy. And stand into your right foot. Like you literally wanted to stand up from the ground here, or when you stand up from a chair, that's what you do. You shift your weight into the right foot. So stand into the right foot and the right side of the pelvis might start to come off the floor. And it might only come off the floor an inch, or eventually it might literally come up quite far. If you keep pressing down through that right foot, it's almost like you want to sort of kick the ground away behind you. that right side of the pelvis may come way up and turning you into quite a stretchy, twisty thing. So allow that to happen if it wants to. If you notice the left side of the pelvis also coming off the floor, go back, start again. So the left side of the pelvis actually wants to stay. And in fact, what we're doing is we're rolling onto our left side almost. So the left leg has rolled way out. The little toe might be on the floor by now. You could even imagine if I asked you now to literally flip over onto your belly, that's all you would do. You would kick off that right foot and you go plonk over. We're not going to do that, but that's the action that you're doing here. Pushing down through the right foot, letting the right side of the pelvis come up, taking you into a little twist here. And notice for yourself, how far up does this movement travel for you? Does it come up to the ribs or up behind the heart? Maybe even up into the neck. Which way does your head want to go? My tip will be to send the right arm away from you and let that right shoulder stay heavy. And the head might want to match that. Anchoring down a little bit more through the heel of the foot. See what happens there. The foot stays flat on the floor, anchor down vertically down through the heel. And then let's take a slightly deeper breath here. I call this like the freestyle breath. So through the nose, through the mouth, with a sigh, without a sigh, as you wish. Whatever might serve you best here. Yeah, the body responds to that. Notice what it even feels like taking a deeper breath here with the diaphragm being all twisted and pulled across. And then we're going to reverse the effort. So stop pushing down through the right foot, but ease off and you let the body roll back slowly to the center, letting it come back. And then for a moment, we'll straighten the right leg along the floor as well, to have a check-in using the floor as a soundboard here. Notice how that feels, right side, left side. So as my side note here, we would always want to, after a pose, especially when we do something left and right, that might create a little change in the body, give some time to people to really notice. And notice for themselves, because they will notice what they notice. So we can't really prescribe what that is. So I'm not asking you to feel the length of the right side of the body. I'm just asking you to notice, how does the right side body feel? How does the left side feel? It is what it is for you. And then let's change and do the same on the other side. So placing the left foot flat on the floor. And literally before I start, and I do this literally also myself, even though I've done this so many times, I consciously take a moment to really pacify that right side of the body, because you never know, my hip flexors and there can be some tension here that I don't even notice, that I'm not aware of. So I take some time. Dear right side of the body, please drop. Okay, maybe with an exhale. Then we come to the left foot. I say hello to it, even making sure it's on my brain, on my map. And then I begin to deepen my imprint of my left foot, beginning to press down into the floor. And then I pause for a moment before I take this into the twist. I want to make sure that the right side really hasn't joined in. It can sort of sneak up on you and secretly join in. So take a moment, maybe another exhale, to drop that pelvis on the right side so that we can really let the body roll to the right as we then press a little bit more, giving our weight down through the left foot, standing into the left foot, and then you can let it come up. It might take you several breaths, several minutes. It might come up in one little go, it flies up. That's all fine. You're vertically pressing down into the ground, kicking the floor back behind you. And allow that left side of the pelvis to come as far up as you would like. And it might turn into this stretchy, twisty number. Check in how far this movement travels up your spine. Does it go all the way to your head? Does it stop somewhere halfway? That's all good. anchor a little bit more down through your left heel and see what that might do to the pose. And then let's take a couple of those deep freestyle breaths and see what that might do and what that feels like. Oh. And then we reverse the effort. So we release the pressure on the left foot, let the body slowly roll back to the floor. Let it settle back. And then this time, let's bend both knees, placing the feet on the floor as our position to check in and notice here. How does that feel on the body? And how is the body resting on the ground? Check in for a moment the feeling between the body and the mat, that relationship. How is the body resting on the ground? Great. And let's invite the knees into the chest, hug your ankles over, and let's have a little rock from side to side. Maybe you want to circle. That's all good. And then from here, we're going to turn onto our side. So you might want to roll in a way that you can see me, if that's available in your whole setup. And see what you need to do to be comfortable lying on your side. So very often we would be asked now to place something out underneath our head, like a block or our arm or blanket or a cushion, because we feel like our head should stay in line with the spine. However, if it's available for you, so if you don't have a neck injury or anything going on in the neck there, let your head rest on the floor and check in what that feels like for you. Because your neck vertebrae are absolutely fine to go into this side benditure. And in fact, if we do allow that to happen, there can finally be a release here. So see if, obviously if it's really not comfortable, you place something under your head. So for a moment, try and make your head as light as possible. So you're not picking it off the floor, but imagine somebody would want to slide a piece of paper underneath it. So see if you can take all of the weight out of your head, and it's about 7 kilos or so, so quite heavy. Take all of those 7 kilos out. So there's no pressure on the side of the head, and check how much work that is in the whole of your body. Oof. And so let's let that go and let the head rest. Let it drop into the ground. We could try that with the top leg as well. So try and make that top leg as light as it can possibly be. We're not lifting it up. Keep it down so they're still touching, but it feels like you could slide a piece of paper between the knees. So just take the weight out of the top leg. And check how much work that is. The leg is also quite heavy. Oof. And let's release that. Ooh, let it drop. So the side note here is we are kind of making people aware of the extreme end of the effort, to notice whether maybe they have a tendency towards holding themselves away from the ground, and that might help to rest into the ground. And we want that. We want here, the point of this is to find a little bit of rest. Let's have the top arm straight out in front of us. And we're going to start sliding the top hand forwards, but it's not really so much the hand that's taking the lead, it's the top shoulder that's going to move forwards as far as you can go. And that will make you roll a little bit forwards, and you might your face might face down towards the mat. And there's only so far we can go because we're in our own way. So that's fine. And then we draw the shoulder back. And then keep going back, And back is not so much of a problem because there's nothing in the way. So that might turn you into a twist, or maybe not, I don't know. But you can go as far back as you want here. And then we keep going forwards and back. So here are the things I want to make sure. First of all, is the top shoulder that's in the driving seat. So see if you can let the rest of the body only follow. So it's not joining in actively. It's the top shoulder that's doing the movement. Second is that top arm. Try not lift it up in the typical yoga style, but let it flop, and sort of mine, for example, is so it ends up right across my face. Just let your arm stay really lazy and passive, flopping onto your body somewhere, and then, you know, kind of just lengthens out in front quite naturally with the movement of the shoulder. And the rest of the body is rolling along. Anytime you might notice a part of the body wanting to join in, see if you can pause for a moment and then step back again, reverse a little bit, and see if you can pass through that point again, but this time without the extra effort, but actually moving through. So it might be that you notice like your head wanting to lift and join in somehow forward. Just a moment, pause, go back and try again. You might even notice like your abdominals or your pelvic floor wanting to join in for some reason. See if you can pause, go back and try again, moving through without that effort. So the trick here is to really focus on the shoulder being in the driving seat, and we keep rolling forwards and back. This is a wonderful go-to rolling practice. I quite like rolling, to release tension in the neck, because we're allowing it to come into this natural side bend. We're allowing the head to really come to rest. And we are bringing some movement into the upper spine. Good. So from here, take a moment and roll onto your back. You can have your knees bent or straighten your legs as you wish, and check in how that feels in the body, and how that feels on the right side and how that feels on the left side. Maybe a couple of deeper breaths. This way of working will also act on our nervous system. So any spontaneous responses like a deep breath or swallowing, or the need to shake a little bit or move, all of that is really welcome. And I would invite you to really give that space and go for it, let it happen, so the body keeps processing. And so let's try the same thing on the other side. You can roll over or sit up and change as you wish. Most of you have sort of fallen off your screen a little bit, so I can't really see you, which is okay, which means I can get to join you. So we won't need to go through the same exercises of lifting the head unless you found that really useful. If you found that was really helpful to tell your body the extreme of it, then go ahead and do it all, making the head really light or making the leg really light, and then trying to drop it again. If you feel relatively confident here that, yes, you are giving the body down into the ground as best as possible, then let's go top shoulder, moving forwards. I'll notice you can only go so far with that because you're in your own way a little bit. And then drawing the top shoulder back, and back you can go as far as you want here because there's nothing in the way, as far as feels comfortable for you. And that top arm, you just kind of let it flop somewhere. It could be that it flops on your body, or in my case, on my face. But actually, I find that really helpful when it flops on my face because it gives some weight down through the head, reminding my head of staying really connected to the ground. I like that weight on my head. You might find that's not so comfortable for you, and that's fine. So let the arm go wherever it wants to go. But try and keep it really passive. That's the idea. And again, like we did before, check if there are any moments on this path that you feel, oh, the rest of the body just joined in to push along a little bit. Mine just did because I'm talking too much. So I'm pausing. I reverse a little bit, a couple of centimeters, and I'm going to try again. Probably I need shut up as well. Whew. Rolling along. The trick is to really let your top shoulder take the lead here, and the rest of the body just follows. So we're finding more ease and more rest in the body that will habitually be quite difficult for many people. And there's a really lovely exercise to release some of the stress tension around the neck area. Let's maybe after this one come to rest on our side. We'll stay on our side here for a moment and take a breath, and then slowly gather ourselves and come up. So you take your top hand to the floor to help you push up, and your top leg can extend away to slowly allow you to shift position. And then from here, let's come onto all fours. So these things, well, I kind of already gave quite a lot of side notes on that, but it's really that invitation to find the sensation of rest in the first place of the body and helping the body along with that. And you'll notice throughout the things that we will be doing, it's what we'll be looking for throughout the practice. And so we will look for that coming onto all fours. So find your cat position. Like I said before, you use your props as you're used to, blankets for padding, etc. And as you're here in your cat pose, that however you set that up normally, let's go into lazy mode, which means, and it's only for a moment, I promise, let your belly flop, let your bum stick out, collapse between your shoulders a little bit, like go to the place where your yoga teacher is going to tell you off in a moment. And for some of you, you might actually go, whoa, why am I not allowed to stay here? It's quite comfortable. I find this quite comfortable. I'm definitely more of the lazy type. And then let's see the opposite extreme. So we're just going through the full spectrum. Push the ground away, go into superhero yogi mode. Push the ground away. Here you come, superhero yogi. And you might find that this is definitely your happier place because you like being strong and stable and all together. So just check for yourself, where is your happy place? And it might be that you want to go back to the lazy one to check because you're not so sure, or you want to, keep going through the full range. So as a side note, teaching note, taking people through the spectrum to even realize where there might be hanging out, where is their tendency. And then we can invite the body to find its own compromise. So where can you go in your cat alignment where you feel you are not applying too much effort, so you've eased off that effort, but you're not collapsing either. And so we're looking for, I will go back to the sound reference, a quieter place where there is a sense of support through our structure and a resting through our structure. Notice how that might respond in the neck in the way that you're holding your head. And then in this position, let's go through a couple of cat and cow, so a few rounds of flexion and extension. Feel free to breathe any way you are used to. You can synchronize or not with a breath here. Feel free to go as fast or slow as you would like, but see if you can keep that relative quiet in the shoulders, and observe how that sensation might naturally change just because of the movement that we're doing here. So notice as you come into extension, there is a sort of having to let go in the shoulders a little bit more so that you can actually come through. And in order to come into flexion, you'll notice how you're probably engaging a little bit more and it's more active. There's a little bit of effort coming through the arms and shoulders. Great. So as a side note, I love using these really simple poses and actually look at what's happening because they're relatively, we'll say, simple. I mean, of course, that's relative. But it's also relatively familiar to those people who have done a lot of yoga already. So they're really handy to point out some of our habits and some of our holding patterns and, you know, what we always do, what we always default to. So it helps to then disturb that a little bit and just challenge that in some way. Something that I really like doing here in when I'm working on all fours, because of course, for many people that becomes challenging in their wrists. And that goes back to the point I was talking about before, is that very often we are not quite able to actually discriminate between sensation and actual pain. And so I invite people to actually walk their hands around a little bit, turning them outwards and then back. And then also kind of coming round and back facing towards each other. And for people to just check if that might give enough relief in the wrists. And they might actually be able to stay on their hands for a little bit longer. And of course, there is an explicit invitation to come off the wrists anytime. And if there is joint pain when we are weight bearing, it's a sign of a weakness in the tissues, and we want to build more resilience in those tissues, and weight bearing will be great for that. So if we can find a way to change the story here, notice, okay, yes, I feel some pressure, and yes, there is some work going on, but actually it isn't pain. I'm making it into a pain story. This is okay, I can stay. So this is the question that we always want to ask, is this okay? Does this still feel okay? And as soon as it obviously isn't, the invitation is to come off. So let's have a moment, since we're on our hands all the time, and release that. I always love inviting people sneakily and secretly to come to kneel onto their heels, because that's so great for knees, ankles, and to even come into child pose from time to time, not so much for rest, but more really to get beautiful flexion in the hips and knees, beautiful extension through the ankles. And of course, here we can take the opportunity to give the wrist a little break, but also a nice way to release the back, just for it to come into flexion. And so for us as facilitators, it's a nice opportunity to see how people's flexion is doing here, because quite often you might notice how flexion, especially in the lower back here, obviously is quite challenging for people as the lower back has sort of gone into a bit more of a rigid place. Great. So from here, and I invite you to observe that for a moment. I want us to explore an upward facing dog. So from my all fours position, I take my hands a good hand's length in front. And we do the same thing as we come forwards and take the shoulders over the hands. Let's check if we've gone a bit heavy, because it's a bit too much work and we've sort of collapsed a bit, or whether we've gone into overcompensation for this already and gone into pushing, or whether maybe coming from the quieter place back here, I can move forward, shifting my shoulders over the hands, maintaining that quieter place. And then the second step, I look down to my pelvis and I'll kind of wiggle it a little bit or sway it to try and consciously release a little bit across the front of the pelvis, front of the thighs. And then it's a sense of giving the pelvis down towards the ground, releasing it, staying supported through the shoulders though, so we don't want to collapse once we set that up, to then come through into our back bend. And once we're here, we check in again that we haven't sort of gone into collapse nor into pushing mode, but that we've still got that spacious, supported, restful setup through our structure. I see most of you have already joined in. I invite you to just come in and out of that a couple of times rather than staying long in this pose, because we'll just build up tension here, because the work is in the how we're getting into it, paying attention. So as we take some weight through the hands, step one is to find that place where we are feeling spacious and supported and resting through our bones. And then stage two is finding a way to free up the pelvis a little bit. And I like to add a little bit of side-to-side movement for that. Maybe even looking down to the pelvis, a little bit of rounding to begin with. That will help to ease and create space as well. And then inviting, releasing the pelvis to come forwards and through to the ground, to take you through into your upward facing dog. Very nice. And then once you've tried that once or twice, feel free to sit back or come into child pose if that's a good place for you. And when you come into child pose, see how you can make that in the most comfortable possible. So maybe you're making a pillow with your hands for your head to rest on, or maybe you'll keep moving a little bit side to side in your child pose if you don't want to stay still. Finding a way for you to take a little break here. Very nice. So there is a third element to that upward facing dog, but we're going to explore that a little bit differently. And that is the actual extension coming up through the whole of the spine. So let's come into child pose. And you could do this also on your forearms, or feel free to obviously place something under your sit bones. But find a placement for your forehead for it to rest. So that can be on the floor or on a block, wherever that might be. And once you're here, take a moment to really arrive. And what I'd like you to do is to lift your head in a moment, but only from that kind of bendy vertebra in your neck. So, you know, when where your neck has that bending ability. So lift your head to look up in front of you, only from that one place in your neck spine, and see how far forwards you can see. So I don't know where you are on your mat, but I can't even see the front end of the mat. I can literally just about see past my fingers. So feel free to do that once or twice, but it's not that comfortable, so don't overdo that. I just want you to see what it would feel like if we only lift the head from the neck. And then from here, add, let's say 3 or 4 vertebrae to the movement. So extend the movement a little bit further down your spine, but only about 3 or 4 vertebrae. For the recording, I'll also do it here for a reference. So lifting the head, looking out in front, but adding about 3 or 4 vertebrae into the whole movement already. So now I can see just beyond the front end of my mat, but I can't really see up the wall in front of me just yet. So we can try that once or twice. And then add another 4 vertebrae.
to your neck. So imagine your neck is just much longer than it really is. So your neck starts somewhere behind your heart. So begin to lift your head with a neck that's much, much longer, starting from somewhere behind your heart. And see how far you can now see in front of you. So try that a couple of times. Lifting your head from behind your heart. Great. And then let's release that and come and sit up onto your heels for a moment. I couldn't see most of you, but I am assuming, maybe you can give me a little thumb signal, that the movement was much greater when you were lifting the head up from somewhere behind your heart. Yes? Great. Okay. So, understanding flexion and extension, let's see what the whole spine is doing. So, if you wanted to look down at your belly button, what would you do to do that? So in the ideal world, you'll find your pelvis kind of tilting a little bit and you're coming into a flexion, rounding your back so that you can see all the way down to your belly button, coming into flexion. And then if you wanted to look up to the ceiling, because there's a beautiful butterfly, again, what we've just learned, we can look up with more ease if we let the spine join in. So you might find your whole pelvis tilting the other way and you're coming into full extension through the spine to look up. Yeah, so that's pretty much what's happening when we're doing cat and cow. And that is when our hips are in flexion. So the spine could help out. We will have a much more confluent movement, much more supported movement if the whole spine actually joined in. The problem is that we hold a lot of tension, but also like we've lost a whole sort of range of movement in our upper body because our upper body has to do a lot of stabilizing all day long because of our work with the arms happening in front of us. So there's a lot of stabilizing our upper body has to do for us all day long, plus stress tension, plus bad habits and computer work, etc., etc. So the neck has gone into probably very isolated movement because the rest of the body has gone so rigid and is not really joining fully in. You know why in age car accidents happen more easily, kind of getting out of the parking spot or whatever, is because, you know, people only turn their head, but they don't turn the whole body anymore. So they can't see behind them. So same thing here. We want to let the whole spine help us out so we can see the whole ceiling. And if we round through the whole spine, we could look down to the belly button, or in cat pose, it would be down between the feet. So what does that look like when we're standing up? So we don't have to stand, we can just come up to high kneeling. Same thing, because then our hips would be in extension. And so let's try and do the same that we did in child pose. Look up just from that bendy part of the spine. So from that one vertebra in the spine that has the bend, and look up to the ceiling, just from your neck. And check what that feels like. So only moving from the neck, looking up to the ceiling. Good. But now let's see if we can look up from behind the heart. So use your super long neck that reaches down to somewhere like the, I don't know, well, behind your heart somewhere, and look up from there. So you'd be lifting up through your chest area a little bit here, and then begin to look up. So that will feel a bit different. And maybe you can look further behind you. Great. And then the third thing that could actually join in and help us here, if we were moving in confluence, is the pelvis. So push your pelvis forwards. Pelvis comes forwards first. So here goes a little bit different to when we are in flexion in the hips. Pelvis goes forwards and then lift up behind the heart and then look up. And you might notice that you can see even further. So we can have the whole spine help us out when we want to look up. I'm not going to say when we want to look behind us, because if you want to look behind you, you should turn and not do this, but never mind. But to look up, no, and to reach something at the top shelf. Our pelvis wants to join in. Great. Let's explore that in a lunge position. Feel free to place something under your back knee. I don't need to come into a huge lunge at all. I'm really a fan of small lunges. Have a little bit of forwards and back movement here to find the equal place between your front foot and your back knee. So we can let the pelvis come to rest here. And then same thing, we move the pelvis forwards. So this is with our lunge. We move the pelvis forwards and then lift up from behind the heart and look up. So here we notice, okay, there's quite a bit of lengthening having to happen through the psoas. Moving the pelvis forwards, lifting up from behind the heart, looking up. And take one hand, make a fist, and place one hand as high up your spine as you can. So use your arm that is more able to do that. And then push your pelvis forwards with your lunge. And then you can lean back over that fist because you've got that touch point. You feel where to lean back over. Lean back over that fist and look up. Great. Let's try the other side as well. Just for kicks. Good. So finding that support between front foot and back knee. We move the pelvis forward. Place your fist up along your spine, on your spine as high up as you can. And then we move the pelvis forwards. Then you extend over that fist that's on your spine and look up, coming into your full extension. Good. Very nice. Let's have a little break. And so some people will find that a bit more challenging in the lower back. You might find it challenging in your lower back. Here is something quite nice to explore, I think, is to actually play with pigeon pose for the sake of the extension. So let's bring one leg forwards and please have your foot in quite close to you and your foot pointed, sorry, to get that cushion out of the way. Okay, so I don't want to see a flexed foot here, please. I'm happy to explain that later. So I've got my leg relatively close to me, my foot is long, and I'm coming forwards to a comfortable place. That could be on your elbows or on your hands. And rest your head for a moment. So you're allowing your back to come into a flexion, letting the back round. Notice how there is a gentle ease and opening through your lower back. And so because we have that front knee bent, we have that opening through the lower back here, which might help us if we're feeling a little bit of a pinch or compaction in the lower back in our extensions. So from here, let's start from the groins. From that long groin, from the open leg, see if you can begin to elongate forwards through your torso. And then slowly begin to, with that, as the front body elongates, walk yourself up on your hands and then begin to lift up behind your heart and possibly come into your looking up, but you don't even have to look up. You can just look forwards here. See if you can come into that sense of extension here. But notice how that might be different in your lower back. So in a way, we're not only extending from behind the heart, we're extending all the way from the groin. And if you do get that sense of that elongation coming right through the front body, it might even be a sense that you're elongating away from the back foot even. You feel that connection through the front body. Very nice. Let's release that. Oh, we can play with that on the other side. So again, we have this knee quite bent. The foot is somewhere underneath us. The foot is pointed here, no flexed feet. And then come forwards first. Oh, let the lower back find a little bit of ease here. Tuning into the rounding and opening, the flexion through the lower part of the spine here. You can already get a sense of the lengthening of the back leg. Maybe connecting a little bit with the top of the foot here. Sending the toes away a fraction might give you a sense of that. From there, we walk up through the leg and lengthen up through the groin on the right. And then from there, begin to elongate through the front body, which means you'll walk yourself up onto your hands. And then when you're on your hands, lift up from behind the heart, coming into your extension. So we're like lifting the head up from the groin, we're lifting the head up from the back foot. Wonderful. Great. And we can release that. Feel free to come into child pose for a moment, or maybe a classic combination is coming into downward dog. If your body asks for it, feel free. Or stay seated for a moment, letting that settle. Good. So see the downward dog exploration here. Good. And so let's see if we can get this lifting the head up from the groins into our upward facing dog, because we didn't have that third stage earlier. So I will demonstrate this once. Feel free to watch, and then I'll join you maybe again or see what's happening here on the screen. So 3 steps. Got my hands a little bit out in front. As I shift my shoulders over the hands, I check, am I collapsing? Am I pushing? Or am I able to rest through my arms and find this quiet place? Then let's try and release the pelvis a little bit. I've got a little bit of a wiggle going on here. Freeing it up. I'm rounding a little bit through my back, looking down. Giving the pelvis down towards the ground, keeping the quiet in the shoulders. And then the last element is lengthening from the groins, coming up through the front body, behind the heart, to lift the head. And you can see, I literally can't avoid coming right from the feet. My feet are involved. Into my back bend. And then no need to stay for too long, but rather maybe trying once or twice. So let's have a go. Play in your own time. 3 steps. Finding the restful, quieter place to the shoulders. Finding some ease in the pelvis as that has to open in our back bend. Releasing that. And then lengthening, elongating through the front body, lifting up from behind the heart to look up. So you're adding your extension through the spine. Nice. Great. Good.
So feel free to try that once or twice. Yeah, that's looking great. Good. And so we could also have a go at a downward facing dog, of course. So kind of same idea. For the sake of this one, let's have a very short stance, downward dog. Really for the sake of this, I'll make it much easier. So we're going to tuck the toes. Actually, just for a moment, come into your all fours pose and check in what that feels like in terms of the weight that you perceive here through your arms, your shoulders, your wrists. Notice if there is a difference. So I didn't do as many repetitions of all this as you guys, but I just realized what a difference that was coming onto my hands. It felt like literally 10 times lighter to when I first came onto my hands at the beginning. So I know I'm prescribing here what you might feel like, and maybe you won't feel this way. But as a side note, keep checking in throughout the practice on how sensation develops as well. So let's tuck the toes under and sit back towards the heels. And we can do the same little play here. So see if you can take all of the weight out of your hands, like you wanted to slide a piece of paper underneath. They don't come off, but just make them super light, and observe how much work that is in the rest of the body. Really having to hold yourself up. Oh, and relax that. Good. Let's go opposite. Go push. Push the ground away. Superhero. Oh, okay, that's a lot of work too. And let's relax that. Here we can actually add a third one. You could collapse a little bit by letting your belly hang and let your ribs be heavy on your spine. Notice what that feels like. Good. So let's find the compromise between these. And it's like a little trick. So to start with, round a little bit through your lower back. It feels a bit like you're not holding this in, but you're gathering this in, and allow your ribs to be a bit lighter on your structure. And then see if you can relax the shoulders a little bit more, if that's possible, so that you can rest through your arms into your hands. Rest from behind your heart into your hands. Find some ease in the neck, maybe by moving the head a little bit. And then all we need to do, she says, is open the legs out from underneath us to come into a downward facing dog. There is no push through the arms required. We want to rest through the arms and lift the knees off the floor and open the legs out from underneath us. And maybe the knees come to straight here, maybe they won't, that doesn't really matter. Keeping this resting through the arms and the shoulders. So that stays effortless. And then bending the knees in the same way underneath you, folding the legs and bringing them back down to the floor. And so, especially those that do a lot of yoga, have like the way to come into downward facing dog. And I could teach like a whole day on this, breaking all of that down and starting again. So have a little look, just so that you have the visual reference of what I mean. If I'm on all fours, if I want to bring my sit bones up towards the ceiling, there's no pushing of the arms that is going to get me there. It's got to come from the legs because they are bent, right? That's just logical. So if I'm setting myself up in this way, have a look. What do you see? Oh, my arms and my shoulders and my neck, they are already in downward dog. They're already done. So I might as well go and rest through. And here's a little game that we're going to try.
as our last thing today. Let's see if we can lift the knees off the floor 1 inch without pushing through the arms or shoulders. Or am I pushing back? Or am I pushing back? Or can I rest and lift the knees off? And then I take my sit bones up a little bit. I pause. I stop here. Legs can work. That's all right. Am I pushing? Or am I resting? And then we can go a little bit higher up. I pause and I check. Am I pushing or am I resting? And then maybe you can take the legs even more straight, but you might find coming up this way that your knees won't really want to come to straight here, but that's okay for the point of what we're exploring here. The first thing to check when you're coming into your downward dog is whether you've got a forwards movement going on. And if you do, see if you can think more about going back. Your heels want to go back. So the shoulders stay. Oh, yes, that's lovely. Well done. A little bit quieter. Yeah, ooh, nice. And then relax the head. Yes. So notice also whether you're lifting the head up, it's just habitual, and whether that's actually really helping. Quite a lot of times I see that kind of holding the head up. Yeah. Nice. Yes. Beautiful. Oh, very nice. Okay. Well done. Let's have a little bit of a rest, and choose your resting position. So you might want to lie in Shavasana for a moment. You might want to stay sitting. You might want to lie on your front or your side. You might want to grab a number of props, put socks on, so that you can get as comfortable as possible. And find a little bit of ease. Checking in that there is no unnecessary conflict anywhere in the body. Are the legs able to rest out, roll out, or roll in, depending on the position you're in, or fall away from you towards the ground? Is the pelvis able to drop into the ground? Are your shoulders able to soften? How have you placed your arms? Are they just in that sweet spot for the shoulders here? Either supporting the shoulders or giving them some space. For those lying down, is the head fully resting back? For those sitting up, is the head resting down into the spine? Checking if you notice any tension in the neck or the throat. Sometimes it can be helpful to swallow. Check if your teeth are touching. If so, open the mouth and try and release the jaw a little bit. And invite your tongue to drop away from the roof of the mouth. It wants to rest into the lower palate. And invite your eyes to rest back into the eye sockets. It's a little bit like you're taking the back seat to enjoy the view from further back.
Nothing left to do here, nowhere else to go. So I'll leave you for a couple of minutes to let the body integrate. So in my mind, Shavasana, the resting at the end, is not about recovery, because we shouldn't have practiced in a way where we've created a degree of conflict that requires recovery, but it's for integration. And so the practice today was really subtle. Might argue we hardly moved, but we moved differently. I spoke to your body in possibly a slightly different language that it never heard before. It's quite a bit of information for the body to process. So here is a little bit of time for integration. And the great thing is the body's innate intelligence does know how to do it. We don't have to do anything. The best way we can help is rest. All right, gently begin to deepen your breathing. Receiving the breath from the earth. Receiving a little bit of movement from the earth. Maybe the body feels like having a stretch or a yawn. Maybe the body feels like doing less. Slowly inviting the body to wakefulness. Maybe you want to roll a little bit. In my mind, there can never be enough rolling. And slowly find your way, maybe via your side, come up. And I would normally love to give a longer relaxation phase. For the sake of this little introduction today, I'm mindful of time. I just wanted to allow an extra couple of minutes for any potential questions or comments or doubts or confusions or whatever there might be. And I guess, on the note of giving all of these side notes, I would probably also give more time and space for exploration of each individual thing that we did today. Apart from at the beginning, I did allow quite a bit of time to get into felt sense and to get a little bit of a shift going for you guys, but all of that exploration with cat and up dog, down dog, and all of those poses, in a real class, I would try and give more space to that, really for play, exploration, to notice what's happening there. So I'm aware we were flying through that a little bit. And if you're used to a fast practice, you might have found that was just the slowest thing that you've ever done. So it's all relative, I guess. Any questions, you can pop them into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself.
That was fantastic. Really loved it. For me, the trickiest one for my body to hear was the downward dog. I kept pushing, but after a few times I got it, and there was this like childlike excitement and so much lighter. It was really cool. So I think I'll go back to that a few times. But thank you.
Amazing. You know, after doing this like 3 or 4 times and you get it, that is awesome. That took me a lot longer to get. I can tell you, it took like, so here is a little anecdote. When I changed my practice to literally go back to square one and rediscover my practice, after about a year or so of working with this teacher on a one-to-one basis, quite intensively, I would go and see him and lie down, and he gets involved with about everything. But he said, oh, I'll give you a minute to kind of just do your thing and lie down. And I was like, really? He's going to give me a minute? Like, he never shuts up for a minute. But anyway, gave me like 20 seconds or so. Then I lay down and he was like, oh, that's better. And I was like, what? Like the way I lie down on the floor? I managed to work this out after a year of working with you. You are happy with the way I lie down? Yes. Okay. Then let's try the next posture. So yeah, well done for getting a sense of this after 5 minutes. Amazing. Thanks, Fiona. It's nice to see you in your comment. Any questions? Great. Well, in that case, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Kirsten, thank you so much for having me, inviting me. I cannot wait for the course to start and for sharing some more stuff in the modules, and maybe I'll see some of you there. Really exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Looking forward to seeing you soon, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning, whatever time it is in your part of the world. So thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.